The transport ship shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere of Kepler 442c. Jake Sullivan pressed his face against the small window and watched the alien moon's surface come into view. Strange purple mountains stretched across the horizon, and 3 different colored suns cast an odd light across the landscape. He had never seen anything like it. "First time off Earth?" asked the girl sitting next to him. Her name was Lisa Martin, and she had been making friends with everyone during the long journey from Earth. "Yeah," Jake replied, still staring out the window. "You?" "Second time. My family moved to Mars when I was little, but we came back to Earth when I was 12. Lisa smiled. "This is much more exciting, though. I can't believe we're really going to train with aliens." Jake nodded. 3 months ago, he had been just another military academy student on Earth. Then the Galactic Defense Council had announced their new program. They wanted to bring together young soldiers from 12 different alien species to learn from each other. Earth had been invited to send 20 cadets. Out of millions who applied, Jake had somehow been chosen. The ship landed with a loud thump. Jake grabbed his bag and followed the other human cadets toward the exit. As the doors opened, hot air rushed in. It smelled different from Earth air, like metal and flowers mixed together. "Stay together," called out Commander Hayes, their Earth military escort. "Remember, you represent all of humanity here. Make us proud." Jake stepped off the ship and looked around. The Galactic Defense Academy was huge. Tall silver buildings, stretched up toward the sky, connected by bridges that seemed to float in the air. Alien ships of all shapes and sizes filled the landing area. Some looked like Earth ships, but others were completely strange. One looked like a giant flower, another like a crystal. "Humans. Over here," called a voice. Jake turned and saw his first real alien. The being was tall and thin with blue skin and 4 arms. 2 large black eyes looked down at them from a face that was almost human but not quite. "I am Assistant Director Zalbeth," the alien said in perfect English. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy. Please follow me to your quarters." As they walked, Jake saw other groups of alien cadets. A group of short, furry beings with big ears were talking in high-pitched voices. Another group looked almost like humans, except their skin was green and they had no hair. The most impressive group was a collection of huge, armored beings that looked like they could break a tree in half. "Those are Krillians," Lisa whispered to Jake, pointing at the big armored aliens. "I read about them on the way here. They've conquered more star systems than any other species." Jake watched the Krillians walk by. Each one was at least 8 feet tall, with skin that looked like natural armor. They had 4 arms and moved with the confidence of people who had never lost a fight. One of them looked at the human group and seemed to smile, but not in a friendly way. The human quarters were in a building called Block 7. Each cadet got their own small room with a bed, desk, and storage area. Jake unpacked his few belongings and put on the academy uniform. It was gray with patches showing his name, species, and home planet. "All cadets report to the main assembly hall," announced a voice over the building's communication system. Jake met Lisa and the other humans in the hallway. There was Kevin Walsh, a quiet engineering student who looked nervous about everything. Danny Cooper was there too, a big guy from Earth's military police who seemed excited about the whole experience. The rest of the human group was a mix of young soldiers from different parts of Earth. The assembly hall was enormous. Hundreds of alien cadets filled the seats, all wearing the same gray uniforms but with different patches. Jake found a seat and looked around. He had studied pictures of different alien species, but seeing them in person was completely different. The furry aliens sat together in one section, chattering constantly. The green-skinned humanoids sat very straight and quiet. The Krillians took up an entire section just because of their size. There were other species too, some that Jake recognized and some he had never seen before. A door at the front of the hall opened, and silence fell immediately. The being who walked out was the biggest Krillian Jake had seen yet. He stood nearly 9 feet tall with scars across his armored skin and decorations that showed high military rank. His forearms ended in hands that looked like they could crush steel. "Cadets," the giant alien said, his voice carrying easily through the hall without any amplification. "I am General Vexstar, Commandant of this academy. You are here because your governments believe you have potential. I am here to determine if they are correct." The general began walking back and forth across the front of the hall. His footsteps echoed loudly. "For the next 6 months you will train together. You will learn each other's fighting techniques, military strategies, and technologies. Some of you will succeed. Some of you will fail and be sent home in disgrace." Jake felt other cadets looking at the human section. Many of the looks were not friendly. "Each species brings different strengths to this academy," General Vextar continued. "The Thraxians bring their natural camouflage abilities. The Zephyrians bring their telepathic coordination. The Krillians bring superior physical strength and natural armor." The general stopped and looked directly at the human section. "And the humans bring—" He paused for a long moment. "Well, we shall see what the humans bring." Several alien cadets laughed. Jake felt his face get hot, but he kept quiet. "Training begins tomorrow at dawn," General Vexitar announced. "Do not disappoint me." As the assembly ended and cadets began filing out, Jake heard comments from the alien students. "Humans look so weak," said one of the green-skinned aliens. "No natural armor, no enhanced abilities," added a Krillian cadet. "Why are they even here?" "I heard their planet only joined the galactic community 5 years ago," laughed another alien. "They probably still fight with sticks and stones." Jake clenched his fists but kept walking. Lisa put a hand on his arm. "Ignore them," she whispered. "We'll show them what humans can do." That evening, the human cadets ate dinner together in the Academy cafeteria. The food was strange but edible, designed to be safe for all the different alien biologies. Jake noticed that the other species mostly stayed with their own groups. The humans got a table in the corner. "Did you see the size of those Krillians?" Kevin asked nervously. "How are we supposed to compete with that?" "We don't compete with strength," Danny replied. "We use our brains." "What if our brains aren't enough?" Kevin continued. "What if we really don't belong here?" Jake looked around the cafeteria. The alien cadets were bigger, stronger, or had special abilities that humans didn't have. But they were also talking loudly and seemed overconfident. On Earth, Jake had learned that overconfident opponents often made mistakes. "We belong here," Jake said quietly. "Earth wouldn't have sent us if we couldn't handle it." "But what do we have that they don't?" asked another human cadet. Jake thought about his training on Earth. Human military doctrine emphasized adaptability, quick thinking, and using an opponent's strength against them. While other species might rely on natural advantages, humans had learned to make the most of what they had. "We'll find out," Jake said. "But I don't think we're as weak as they think we are." Later, as Jake lay in his narrow academy bed, he could hear alien voices in the hallway. Some were friendly conversations, but others were clearly making jokes about the human cadets. Tomorrow would be their first day of real training. Jake closed his eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that the next 6 months would determine whether humanity earned respect among the stars or went home as failures. The academy alarm sounded at 5 in the morning, just like it did every day. Jake rolled out of bed and quickly put on his training uniform. Through his small window, he could see 2 of the 3 suns rising over the purple mountains. After 3 weeks at the academy, he was starting to get used to the strange light. In the hallway, he met Lisa and the other human cadets. They had all learned to stick together. The first few days had been rough, and things were only getting worse. "Ready for another fun day?" Lisa asked with a tired smile. "Can't wait," Jake replied, but his voice was flat. Yesterday had been particularly bad. During combat training, a Krillian cadet had accidentally hit Kevin so hard that he needed medical attention. The academy doctors had fixed his broken ribs quickly, but everyone knew it wasn't really an accident. The human group walked to the cafeteria together. As usual, conversations stopped when they entered. Jake could feel dozens of alien eyes watching them. Some looks were curious, but most were unfriendly. They got their breakfast and sat at their usual table in the corner. The food looked like gray paste, but tasted okay. Jake had learned not to ask what it was made from. "Look at them," whispered Danny, nodding toward a table of Krillian cadets. "They're staring at us again." Jake glanced over. The 4 Krillians were indeed watching the humans while talking quietly among themselves. One of them, a cadet named Trixnall, was the biggest bully in their class. He had made Kevin's life miserable since the first day. "Just ignore them," Lisa said. "They want us to react." But ignoring them was getting harder every day. The Krillians weren't the only problem. Most of the other alien species treated humans like they didn't belong at the academy. During joint exercises, they were always picked last. In study groups, their ideas were dismissed without consideration. Even the academy instructors seemed to expect less from the human cadets. After breakfast, they headed to their first class of the day. Military history was taught by Professor Keltar, a thin alien with purple skin and 6 arms. He spent most of his time talking about the great battles fought by different alien species. The siege of Gamma Station lasted 47 days, Professor Keltar said, pointing at a holographic display. The Krillian fleet used their superior firepower to break through the defenders' shields. Jake raised his hand. "Professor, what about the Battle of Earth's moon? Human forces defeated a larger alien invasion fleet using guerrilla tactics and improvised weapons." Several alien cadets laughed. Professor Keltar looked annoyed. "That was hardly a real battle," the professor said dismissively. "The invading force was a small raiding party, not a proper military fleet. Human military achievements are not comparable to established galactic powers." Jake felt his face turn red, but he stayed quiet. This happened in every class. Human military history was either ignored or dismissed as unimportant. The next class was physical training with Instructor Velmon, a massive Thraxian who could turn invisible at will. Today they were practicing hand-to-hand combat techniques. "Pair up for sparring practice," Instructor Velmon announced. "Humans with Krillians, Zephyrians with Drekmari." Jake's heart sank. The pairings were obviously designed to put humans at a disadvantage. Kevin was paired with Trixnall, the biggest Krillian bully. Lisa was matched with another large Krillian cadet. Jake found himself facing Kurdal, a Krillian who outweighed him by at least 100 pounds. "Try not to break the humans too badly," Instructor Velmon said, and several alien cadets laughed. The sparring began. Jake watched in horror as Kevin was immediately grabbed by Trixnall and thrown to the ground. The Krillian cadet was supposed to be practicing technique, but he was clearly trying to hurt Kevin. "Get up, weak one," Trixnall growled. "Show me this famous human fighting spirit." Kevin tried to stand, but Trixnall swept his legs and sent him crashing down again. Other cadets gathered around to watch, cheering for the Krillian. Jake started toward them, but Kurdal blocked his way. "Your turn, soft skin," Kurdal said with a nasty grin. Jake had been studying Krillian anatomy during his free time. He knew their thick armor had weak points at the joints. He also knew that Krillians relied on their strength and natural protection, which made them overconfident and sloppy. When Kurdal charged forward, Jake stepped aside and struck at the alien's knee joint. Kurdal stumbled but didn't fall. He turned and swung one of his 4 arms at Jake's head. Jake ducked and countered with a quick jab to the Krillian's ribs, right between 2 armor plates. Kurdal made a surprised noise and backed away. He looked shocked that a human had actually hurt him. "Lucky hit," he snarled. But Jake could see doubt in the alien's eyes now. The other cadets had stopped watching Kevin's beating and were looking at Jake instead. The sparring session continued for another 20 minutes. Jake managed to avoid serious injury, though he collected several bruises. Kevin wasn't so lucky. By the end of class, he could barely walk. "Pathetic display by the humans," Instructor Velmon announced. "Perhaps Earth should reconsider sending soldiers to this academy." After class, Jake helped Kevin to the medical bay. The academy doctors were efficient but cold. They healed Kevin's injuries without comment, as if human cadets getting hurt was perfectly normal. "I can't keep doing this," Kevin whispered as they walked back to their quarters. "They're going to kill me." "No, they won't," Jake said firmly. "We just need to be smarter." That afternoon was tactical studies with General Vextar himself. The Sci-Fi class met in a large room with holographic battle displays. Today they were studying fleet formations and battle strategies. General Vextar showed various alien military formations. The Krillian wedge formation for breaking enemy lines. the Thraxian stealth deployment for surprise attacks, the Zephyrian, mind-link coordination for perfect teamwork. Now, the general said, let us examine some human military strategies. Jake sat up hopefully. Finally, they would discuss human tactics. General Vexitar activated a display showing Earth's military history. But instead of serious analysis, he focused on humanity's failures and limitations. Human forces are small and weak by galactic standards, he said. They compensate with elaborate planning and defensive positions like prey animals hiding from predators. More alien laughter filled the room. Jake clenched his fists under his desk. Their weapons are primitive, their ships are slow, and their soldiers lack natural advantages. The general continued. Human military doctrine can best be described as organized desperation. Jake stood up. General, that's not accurate. Human forces have won battles against superior numbers and technology through tactical innovation and adaptability. The room went completely quiet. Speaking back to General Vexitar was something no cadet had ever done before. The general turned, slowly to face Jake. His forearms crossed over his massive chest and his eyes narrowed dangerously. Cadet Sullivan, he said, his voice low and threatening. Are you questioning my assessment? Jake knew he was in trouble, but he couldn't back down now. I'm respectfully suggesting that human military capabilities deserve the same serious analysis. You give other species, sir, several alien cadets gasped. Even Lisa looked terrified. General Vexitar walked slowly across the room until he was standing directly in front of Jake. The Krillian was so tall that Jake had to look up to meet his eyes. Human tactics, the general said loudly enough for everyone to hear, are the flailing of children pretending to be warriors. Your species survived not through strength or skill, but through luck and the mercy of your betters. Jake felt his face burning with anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. With respect, General, I disagree. The silence in the room was complete. General Vexitar stared down at Jake for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. We shall see, Cadet Sullivan, he said quietly. We shall see exactly what humans are capable of. That evening, the human cadets ate dinner in tense silence. Word of Jake's confrontation with the general had spread throughout the academy. Some alien cadets whispered and pointed at their table. Others looked at Jake with what might have been respect, but most seemed to be waiting for something to happen. You shouldn't have done that, Kevin said quietly. Now he's going to make things even worse for all of us. Things are already bad, Jake replied. At least now they know we won't just take it quietly. Lisa looked worried. What do you think he'll do? Jake didn't answer, but he had a feeling they would find out soon. General Vexitar didn't seem like the type to forget a challenge to his authority. The next few days were going to be very interesting. The next morning brought an announcement that made Jake's stomach drop. All cadets were to report to the main training hall for a special demonstration. General Vexitar would be showcasing the combat techniques of each species represented at the academy. Jake sat with the other human cadets in the large training hall. The walls were lined with weapons from different alien worlds, and the floor was covered with soft mats for safety. Hundreds of cadets filled the viewing seats, all excited to see their species' fighting styles displayed. General Vexitar stood in the center of the training area, looking even more massive than usual. His forearms were crossed, and his scarred armor gleamed under the bright lights. Today you will see why different species have earned their place in the galactic community, he announced. Each has unique advantages that make them valuable allies in battle. The first demonstration was by the Thraxians. 2 cadets stepped forward and began their display. They moved like dancers, flowing from position to position while flickering in and out of visibility. Sometimes they were completely invisible, attacking from angles their opponent couldn't see. The watching cadets cheered and applauded. The Thraxian stealth advantage, General Vexitar explained, perfect for reconnaissance and surprise attacks. Next came the Zephyrians. 4 cadets demonstrated their telepathic coordination, moving as one mind in 4 bodies. They anticipated each other's moves perfectly, creating a fighting formation that was beautiful and deadly. Again, loud applause filled the hall. Zephyrian Mindlink combat, the general said approvingly. No communication delays. Perfect teamwork. The Drakmari cadets showed their natural energy projection abilities, creating shields and weapons from pure force. The Veltari demonstrated their incredible speed, moving so fast they were just blurs. Each species received detailed explanations of their advantages and enthusiastic praise from General Vextar. Finally, it was time for the Krillian demonstration. Two massive cadets stepped forward, their natural armor gleaming. They fought with devastating power, each blow capable of shattering stone. Their forearms moved independently, creating a storm of attacks that would overwhelm most opponents. The Krillian warrior advantage, General Vextar said with obvious pride. Superior strength, natural armor, and centuries of military tradition. The applause for the Krillians was the loudest yet. General Vextar smiled and nodded approvingly. Then he looked toward the human section. And now, he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement, we come to our newest academy participants. Jake felt every eye in the hall turn toward the human cadets. The silence was uncomfortable, broken only by a few quiet laughs from alien students. The humans, General Vextar continued, have no natural armor, no enhanced abilities, no telepathic links, and no energy projection. They are physically weak by galactic standards and have only been spacefaring for a few years. More laughter now, louder and more open. Jake saw Kevin shrink down in his seat, trying to make himself invisible. However, the general said, they have requested to demonstrate their combat techniques. Perhaps we can learn something from Earth's military traditions. The way he said it made it clear that he expected to learn nothing useful at all. Jake stood up. He had been dreading this moment, but he couldn't let his species be humiliated without trying to defend them. I'll do the demonstration, General, he said loudly. Excellent, General Vextar replied. Please, show us these famous human fighting techniques. Jake walked down to the training floor, feeling hundreds of alien eyes watching him. The mat felt soft under his feet, and the bright lights made everything seem too exposed. He could hear whispered comments from the watching cadets. Look how small he is. No armor at all. This should be funny. Jake took a deep breath and moved to the center of the mat. He had trained in mixed martial arts since he was 12 years old. Boxing, wrestling, judo, kickboxing, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Human fighting styles that emphasize technique over raw strength. He began his demonstration slowly, showing basic stances and movements. Then he picked up the pace, flowing between different martial art styles. He showed grappling techniques for taking down larger opponents, striking combinations that targeted weak points, and defensive moves that used an attacker's force against them. The laughter started almost immediately. He's dancing, called out a Krillian cadet. Where's the power? Asked another. Looks like a mating ritual, suggested a Drakmari, causing more laughter. Jake tried to ignore the comments and continue his demonstration. He showed how human fighters adapted to different opponents, changing styles and techniques based on what worked. He demonstrated the importance of timing, precision, and intelligence in combat. But the laughter kept getting louder. Even some of the instructors were smiling at what they saw as a pathetic display. Jake finished his demonstration and stood at attention, waiting for General Vexitar's analysis. His face was red with embarrassment, but he had done his best to represent human fighting techniques. General Vextar walked slowly around Jake, looking him up and down like he was examining a broken piece of equipment. Interesting, the general said finally. The human demonstrates elaborate movements and complex techniques, very artistic. More laughter from the watching cadets. However, the general continued, one must ask what purpose these elaborate dances serve in real combat. Against a properly armored opponent with superior strength, such techniques would be useless. Jake felt his anger rising, but he kept his mouth shut. The human style appears to be compensating for physical weakness with unnecessary complexity, General Vextar announced. It is the fighting method of a species that has never faced truly dangerous opponents. The laughter was loud now, echoing, off the walls of the training hall. Jake saw alien cadets pointing at him and making jokes to their friends. Perhaps, the general said with a cruel smile, humans have developed these elaborate fighting dances because they have never encountered beings capable of real violence. Jake started to turn away, ready to return to his seat and endure the humiliation. But then General Vextar spoke again. After all, the general said loudly enough for everyone to hear, what would you expect from soft-skinned weaklings who compensate for their natural frailty with elaborate dancing? The hall exploded with laughter. Jake stopped walking. The comment hit him like a physical blow, not because it hurt him personally, but because it dismissed everything that humans had accomplished, every battle they had fought, every challenge they had overcome, every time they had proven that determination could overcome natural disadvantages. Jake turned around slowly to face the general. Sir, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the laughter. I respectfully request that you show the same consideration for human fighting techniques that you showed for other species. The laughter stopped immediately. The silence that followed was complete and deadly. General Vextar's expression changed from amusement to anger. His forearms uncrossed and he took a step toward Jake. What did you say, Cadet? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. I said that human fighting techniques deserve the same respect you gave to other species, Jake replied. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. Respect? General Vexitar's voice rose. Respect is earned through strength, not through elaborate performances. Then perhaps you'd like to test human techniques against Krillian strength, Jake said. The words were out before he could stop them. The entire hall gasped. Even Lisa looked terrified. General Vextar's eyes blazed with fury. No cadet had ever challenged him directly, especially not a member of what he considered the weakest species in the academy. You dare challenge me? The general roared. He stormed across the training mat, his massive frame moving with surprising speed. Jake stood his ground, though every instinct told him to run. General Vexitar stopped directly in front of Jake, towering over him like a mountain of armored fury. His forearms flexed and his breathing was heavy with rage. You pathetic little creature, he snarled. You think your dancing can stand against real power? Without warning, General Vextar's upper right arm swung in a vicious backhand aimed at Jake's face. The blow had enough force behind it to knock most beings unconscious, maybe even kill them. Jake saw it coming. The general's massive fist came at Jake's face like a sledgehammer. Time seemed to slow down as Jake watched the armored knuckles approaching. He could see the surprise on General Vextar's face when Jake didn't fall or even step backward from the devastating blow. The strike hit Jake on the left side of his face with a sound like a gunshot. His head snapped to the side, and he felt the warm taste of blood in his mouth. Pain exploded through his skull, but his feet stayed planted firmly on the training mat. The entire hall fell into complete silence. Every alien cadet, every instructor, every being in the room stared in shock. They had expected the small human to crumple like paper. Instead, Jake slowly turned his head back to face the general. A thin line of blood ran from the corner of his mouth. His left cheek was already starting to swell, but his eyes were clear and focused, and he was still standing. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. General Vextar stared down at Jake with confusion and growing anger. His blow should have ended this pathetic display immediately. How was this weak little creature still conscious? Jake wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand. He looked at the red stain for a moment, then raised his eyes to meet the general's gaze. Is that all? Jake asked quietly. The words cut through the silence like a blade. General Vextar's forearms tensed, and his armored face twisted with rage. He had been challenged, struck back with full force, and somehow the challenge was still standing. You little insect, the general snarled, raising his arms for another attack. That was when Jake moved. Human martial arts weren't designed for power. They were designed for efficiency. Every movement had a purpose. Every technique was built to overcome larger, stronger opponents through speed, precision, and the intelligent use of leverage. Jake stepped forward and slightly to his right, moving inside the general's reach before the massive alien could react. His left hand came up to block any follow-up strike while his right hand drove upward in a short, sharp uppercut to the general's solar plexus. The Krillian armor was thick, but Jake had studied alien anatomy for weeks. He knew exactly where to hit. His fist struck the small gap between armor plates right where the general's primary breathing organ was located. General Vextar's eyes went wide with shock and pain. He doubled over involuntarily, gasping for air that wouldn't come. In all his years of combat, no one had ever found that weak spot so quickly or struck it so precisely. But Jake wasn't finished. As the general bent forward, Jake's left elbow came down hard on the back of the alien's thick neck. It was another precise strike, hitting the nerve cluster that controlled balance and coordination in Krillian physiology. General Vextar crashed to his knees on the training mat with a sound like falling rocks. His forearms couldn't catch him fast enough. The massive warrior who had conquered star systems, who had never lost a single combat, was on his knees in front of a human cadet. The silence in the hall was so complete that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Hundreds of alien faces stared at the impossible scene before them. Their unbeatable general, the strongest warrior in the academy, was kneeling on the ground while a small human stood over him. Jake looked down at General Vextar, who was still struggling to breathe properly. The general's forearms shook as he tried to push himself back to his feet. His proud face was twisted with pain and humiliation. For a moment, Jake felt the urge to continue the attack, to show these aliens what humans were really capable of when pushed too far, to make them pay for weeks of insults and abuse. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone even more. Jake stepped back and extended his right hand toward the fallen general. "Sir," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall, "I believe this concludes today's demonstration of human combat techniques." General Vextar stared at the offered hand for several seconds. His breathing was starting to return to normal, but his pride was badly wounded. This human, this supposedly weak creature, had defeated him in front of the entire academy, and now the same human was offering to help him up. Jake kept his hand extended, waiting patiently. Blood still trickled from his split lip, and his face was swelling where the general had struck him, but his expression was calm and respectful. "In human culture," Jake said softly, "we help our opponents after a fight. It shows that we respect them as warriors even when we disagree." Slowly, carefully, General Vextar reached up with one of his massive hands and grasped Jake's much smaller one. Jake pulled, helping the huge alien get back to his feet. The general was still shaky, but he was standing again. They faced each other in the center of the training mat. The general towered over Jake by more than 2 feet, but somehow the human no longer looked small in comparison. "How?" General Vextar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're stronger than me," Jake replied. "You have natural armor, forearms, and decades of combat experience, but you expected me to fight like a Krillian. I fought like a human." "Your techniques," the general said, still catching his breath. "They were precise, efficient." "Human fighting styles aren't about power," Jake explained. "They're about finding weaknesses and exploiting them. We study our opponents, we adapt. We use intelligence to overcome physical disadvantages." General Vextar nodded slowly. "I underestimated you." "Most people do," Jake said. "That's usually their mistake." The general looked around the hall at the hundreds of silent cadets. Krillian students sat with their mouths open. Other species stared in disbelief. The human cadets looked proud but terrified of what might happen next. "Cadets," General Vextar announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "you have just witnessed something remarkable. A human cadet has demonstrated that true strength comes not from natural advantages, but from skill, intelligence, and proper training." He turned back to Jake. "Your species fights differently than any we have encountered. You do not rely on natural armor or enhanced strength, so you have developed precision and adaptability that we lack." Jake nodded respectfully. "Every species has different advantages, sir. Humans have learned to make the most of what we have. Indeed, the general said. He looked at Jake's swollen face and felt something he rarely experienced. Regret. Cadet Sullivan, report to the medical bay. That is an order. Yes, sir, Jake replied. As Jake started to walk toward the exit, General Vextar called after him. Cadet? Jake stopped and turned back. Well done, the general said simply. Jake smiled, despite his split lip. Thank you, sir. The human cadets followed Jake out of the training hall, but not before they saw something that amazed them. Alien cadets were looking at them differently now. Instead of mockery and dismissal, there was curiosity and respect in their eyes. In the hallway, Lisa caught up with Jake. Are you insane? She whispered. You just knocked down General Vextar. I defended myself, Jake corrected. He hit me first. But how did you do it? Kevin asked, his voice full of wonder. He's 3 times your size. Size doesn't matter. If you know where to hit, Jake explained. And if you're fast enough to get there first. Danny was grinning from ear to ear. Did you see their faces? None of them expected that. That's the point, Jake said. Humans succeed because we're underestimated. People see our weaknesses and miss our strengths. As they walked toward the medical bay, Jake could hear excited conversations echoing through the corridors. Word of what had happened was spreading throughout the academy. The small human who had knocked down the unbeatable Krillian general. Jake knew that everything had changed. The other cadets would never look at humans the same way again. They had seen that human weakness was often human strength in disguise. The medical bay quickly healed Jake's injuries, though the doctor seemed very curious about how a human had survived a full-force Krillian strike. By evening, Jake's face was back to normal, but the impact of what had happened would last much longer. That night, as Jake lay in his academy bed, he could hear different sounds in the hallway. Instead of mocking laughter and dismissive comments about humans, there were serious discussions about human fighting techniques. Alien cadets were trying to understand how Jake had moved so quickly and struck so precisely. Tomorrow would be very different from the past 3 weeks. Jake closed his eyes and smiled. Humanity had finally earned some respect among the stars. The next morning, Jake woke up to something he had never experienced at the academy. Silence in the hallway. Not the uncomfortable silence of beings avoiding humans, but the respectful quiet of people who weren't sure how to act around someone who had done the impossible. When Jake opened his door, he found 3 alien cadets waiting for him. A Thraxian, a Zephyrian, and surprisingly, a Krillian. They all looked nervous. Cadet Sullivan, the Thraxian said hesitantly. We wanted to ask you about your fighting techniques. How did you move so fast? Jake blinked in surprise. Yesterday, these same cadets had been laughing at human weakness. Now they wanted to learn from him. It's about timing and positioning, Jake explained. Human fighters study their opponents to find the best moment and place to strike. But General, Vextar's the strongest warrior in the academy, the Krillian cadet said. How did you find his weak point so quickly? Every species has weaknesses, Jake replied. Humans have learned to find them because we have to. We're not the strongest or fastest, so we use our brains instead. The 3 cadets exchanged looks. This was clearly not what they had expected to hear. Would you be willing to teach us? The Zephyrian asked. We would like to understand human combat methods. Jake smiled. I'd be happy to. But you'll have to. Ask General Vextar for permission first. At breakfast, the change was obvious. Instead of sitting alone in the corner, the human cadets found themselves surrounded by curious aliens. Kevin, who had been bullied mercilessly, now had a group of engineering students asking about his design ideas. Lisa was explaining human communication techniques to cadets from 4 different species. Danny leaned over to Jake. This is weird, he whispered. Yesterday they treated us like dirt. Today they want to be our friends. They respected strength, Jake replied quietly. Now they know we have it, even if it's different from theirs. The biggest change came during SUR morning classes. Professor Keltar, who had always dismissed human military achievements, spent 30 minutes discussing the Battle of Earth's moon. He analyzed human tactical innovations with the same seriousness he gave to major galactic conflicts. The human strategy of using small, fast ships against larger vessels shows remarkable tactical flexibility, the professor explained. They adapted their limitations into advantages. Jake sat quietly, letting the professor speak. It felt strange to hear human accomplishments treated with respect instead of mockery. Physical training was even more different. Instructor Velmon paired humans with aliens who wanted to learn from them instead of just overpower them. Jake found himself working with Kurdal, the same Krillian who had tried to hurt him during their first sparring session. "Show me that strike you used on the general," Kurdal requested, the one to his breathing center. Jake demonstrated the technique slowly, explaining how to find the weak point in Krillian armor. "It's not about hitting hard," he said. "It's about hitting the right place at the right time." Kurdal practiced the movement, his forearms moving awkwardly as he tried to copy Jake's precise motions. "This is difficult. Your fighting style requires much more thinking than ours." "That's the point," Jake said. "Krillians rely on natural strength, so your fighting is direct and powerful. Humans have to be clever because we don't have those advantages." Across the training area, Lisa was teaching a group of Zephyrians about human hand-to-hand combat. Kevin was showing alien cadets how human engineering solved problems through creative thinking, rather than brute force applications. The real surprise came at the end of the day. A message appeared on Jake's personal communicator. "Report to General Vextar's office immediately." Jake's stomach dropped. Despite the positive changes around the academy, he was still worried about consequences for what had happened. Striking a superior officer, even in self-defense, was a serious offense. The general's office was large and intimidating, filled with weapons and battle trophies from across the galaxy. General Vextar sat behind a massive desk, looking as imposing as ever. His armor showed no signs of yesterday's encounter. "Cadet Sullivan," the general said as Jake entered. "Please sit down." Jake sat in the chair across from the desk, trying not to show his nervousness. General Vextar studied him for a long moment before speaking. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. Jake blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "I allowed my prejudices to cloud my judgment," the general continued. "I assumed that because humans lack obvious physical advantages, your species was weak. Yesterday, you proved that assumption was wrong." "Thank you, sir," Jake said carefully. "Your species fights differently than any we have encountered, General," Vextar explained. "You do not rely on natural armor or enhanced strength, so you have developed precision and adaptability that we lack. This makes you valuable allies, not weak links." The general stood up and walked to a wall covered with weapons from different worlds. He selected a curved blade with intricate markings. "This is a Krillian honor blade," he said, returning to his desk. "It is given to warriors who show exceptional courage and skill in battle." Jake stared at the blade. "Sir, I'm not sure I deserve that. You faced an opponent 3 times your size who struck you with killing force," General Vextar said. "You not only survived but defeated him. Then instead of pressing your advantage, you helped him to his feet. That shows both warrior skill and warrior honor." The general placed the blade on the desk in front of Jake. "I would like you to help me develop new training protocols that incorporate human fighting techniques. Will you accept this assignment?" Jake looked at the honor blade, then back at the general. "Yes, sir. I would be honored to help." "Excellent," General Vextar said. "Your first task will be to teach other cadets the principles of human combat. Not just the techniques, but the thinking behind them." Over the following weeks, everything changed at the academy. Jake found himself leading mixed-species training sessions, teaching aliens how to analyze opponents and adapt their fighting styles. Kevin became the center of an engineering innovation program that combined human creativity with alien technology. Lisa organized communication workshops that helped different species understand each other better. The human cadets were no longer outcasts. They were valued members of the academy community, respected for their unique perspectives and abilities. 2 months after the incident in the training hall, Jake received another message to report to General Vextar's office. This time he wasn't nervous. "Cadet Sullivan," the general said as Jake entered, "I have an announcement to make." Jake sat down, curious about what the general wanted to discuss. "The Academy Council has been reviewing performance records for all cadets," General Vextar explained. "They have decided to select a valedictorian for this year's graduating class." Jake nodded, wondering which alien cadet had earned the honor. "The valedictorian will give a speech at the graduation ceremony, representing all cadets who have completed the program," the general continued. "This individual must demonstrate not only academic excellence, but also leadership and the ability to bring different species together." General Vextar smiled, an expression that looked strange on his usually stern face. "Congratulations, Valedictorian Sullivan." Jake's mouth fell open. "Sir, are you sure?" "The council was unanimous," the general replied. "You have shown that true strength comes not from natural advantages, but from courage, intelligence, and the wisdom to build bridges instead of walls." 6 months after arriving at the academy as members of the supposedly weakest species, Jake stood at the graduation podium looking out at hundreds of alien faces. Representatives from 12 different civilizations sat in the audience, including high-ranking officials from Earth. "When humans first came to this academy," Jake began his speech, "many people wondered what we could contribute. We had no natural armor, no enhanced abilities, no telepathic links. What could the galaxy's newest species possibly teach civilizations that had been spacefaring for thousands of years?" He paused, looking at the alien cadets who had become his friends and allies. "We learned that our differences are not weaknesses to be hidden, but strengths to be shared. Humans bring adaptability and creative problem-solving. Krillians bring strength and courage. Thraxians bring stealth and patience. Zephyrians bring coordination and unity." Jake gestured toward his fellow graduates. "Alone, each species has limitations. Together, we are stronger than any single civilization could ever be." The applause was thunderous. As Jake stepped down from the podium, General Vextar met him at the bottom of the stairs. "Well said, Valedictorian," the general said, extending one of his massive hands. Jake shook it firmly. "Thank you for giving humans a chance to prove ourselves, sir." "Thank you for proving that I was wrong to doubt you," the general replied. As the graduation ceremony ended, Jake found Lisa and the other human cadets. They had all passed the program with high honors, and more importantly, they had earned the respect of their alien classmates. "So what now?" Lisa asked as they watched alien ships preparing to leave the academy. Jake looked up at the strange sky of Kepler 442c, where 3 different suns were setting behind purple mountains. Soon he would return to Earth to help establish humanity's first interstellar military academy. "Now we go home and make sure the next group of humans is ready for the stars," he said.